Welcome to Re-Educated TV, where we keep you informed. We have now arrived at the ninth avatar, known as Asar, or Kazar, the Black Royal King, the Imperial Royal. In Irish, their god is called Asar, which is spelled Aosar, but pronounced Aesar, Asar. In Hindustani, it's Iashor, Isor, or Ishor, Izor. In Sanskrit, Eswara. In Arabic, Usar. The word Asar was pronounced and written in several ways, such as Asir, Asir, Wazir, Usir, or Usair, and of course, Osiris among the Greeks and others. And as mentioned, he was also the god Khazar, from the mixed nature of the sigma ta or ta, it became Aitzaren and Aitzar and Zar. All these words are found in South India, having the meaning of crucified God, the wise or savior. From this came Isar, Isar, or Ishar, Asar, Isardi or Dev, and Isard, Wisard, Wizard, and Wise Man, and by a similar process wits and wizard, Asar in Egypt, and in the Hebrew style of reading, Rasa, which are all closely connected with the Rasis of India. Upon these, the word Caesar, Khazar, or Zar was formed. The term Caesarean birth, known as a C-section, came from the ninth avatar's name, which in ancient times signified a virgin birth. So Asar of Egypt is the god Khazar or Caesar, the ninth cycle, the ninth age, the age of Pisces, whose symbol was the fish. He was considered the savior of man, father of the sun. His carvings and statues can still be found throughout Egypt, where the evidence of the glory can be seen. His figure is the one depicted holding a crook and flail and the Atef crown upon the head, all symbols of divinity. Khazar is the Iswara of India. Khazari was the name of the prince of Orissa. Kanya is called Khazar, and Kesu, which means imperial royal. In ancient times, Khazarians, meaning the people who worshipped Khazar, were ruled by Khagans or imams. The original Khazars are Ishmaelites. They are called Suwedani or Sofidani. They are also called Kizweri, which is Khazarian or Caesarean. Now, the story of Noah's sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, was created by the Khazars, or the ancient Khazarians empire, who divided the world as such. I won't get too deep into the etymology of the name of the god Ham, but the name Ham came from the god Am, or Amen, or Aman. So how can Ham be a nation? That would be the same as saying the nation of Jesus, referring to Christian devotees. So what happens when you take away these fables? Then most difficulties are removed. All those stories of Ham, Shem, and Japheth's lineage have kept us separated for the longest. With these stories, the Arabs or the Khazars used to govern their domains in Africa, parts of Asia, Europe, and the Iberian Peninsula. The Byzantines, who were also Khazars, adopted the story. They were the same people of the same ancient tribes, and they, meaning the Khazars and the Byzantines, orchestrated the history we have today. So, Scythia was also inhabited by Khazars. The Iberian Peninsula was also inhabited by them. But it is key to note that the original Egyptians, Arabs, and later Hebrews migrated to these regions, which is Africa, before the Ishmaelites. Now the early Egyptians, Scythians, Arabs, and Jews further migrated to Iberia, France, Italy, the British Isles, and other parts of Europe, the Americas, and other parts of the world. They were the shepherd kings. In Tartary, northeast Tartary that is, Khazar is of a black royal lineage that stretched from the times of the Saka or Khan and Kagan, from which the word saga, Sagan, sage, or sages came from. among other words. The royals or the black Khazars spoke a separate language from the common tribes. The Khazar state was ruled by two kings. The main or greater king was more of a sacred role or a sacerdotal divine symbolism. The lesser was in charge of state affairs and military. The Kagan or king was the imam. There were autonomous states. Certain tribes or some tribes were in charge of their own state and military, but answered to the imam or greater king. There were several migrations of the Khazars to Africa. They made war on Egypt and conquered the region from the earliest times, and even much later by way of the Saraceni, whom are the Saracens, the Mohammedans as well, and other groups of the Ishmaelites. And the last to come to Africa were the White Khazars, who became the Ottomans. And the White Khazars, the ones that remained in East Tartary, later became Ashkenazi or Jewish. Now, Scythia was ruled by other tribes of the Indus, but was overrun by the Khazars, known as Massagetæ. Of course, what I have said thus far is not widely known because of that story of Noah's sons, where Japheth are considered Asians, Ham considered African, and Shem who knows where. That's how easy you were separated. Later, when Napoleon conquered the Ottomans, they further segregated the world, where Africa was designated for all blacks, which meant if you are black, you are African, and made themselves the original inhabitants of Europe. The Khazars were the Germanic tribes also. They were the ones that inhabited the region of Europe and other parts, and took on the name German or Germanic. In the times when they first crossed the Rhine and drove out the Gauls, they were called Tungrians and later Germans. By the way, the ancient Gauls were what they would call the Celtic tribes, but more properly, they should be called the early Jews, Druids, or Ionians. Consequently, what was the name of a tribe and not of a people gradually prevailed until all called themselves by this self-invented name of Germans. So do you see what I'm trying to tell you, or trying to show you? That the black Khazars, who went by many names in various places, overran Africa and Europe from the earliest times. They were Tartary. So all these stories about Tartary or Mongols not invading Europe is not true, because they eventually became the English, and they were the Ishmaelites or Arabs in Africa. Now remember, before the Ishmaelites, whom are the Arabs, came to Africa, you had the shepherd kings, who were the original Egyptians, Arabs, and Palestinians. Before it was called Palestine, it was called Palithon, the place of the Pali. And Pali means shepherd, the place of the shepherds. The Giza pyramids were built by the very first black Orientalist. All other people or nations came and saw these pyramids. They were built from the most remotest of times. Now, the Mohammedans were originally Chazdim or Chaldean, descending from a very early period. They took on the name Ishmaelites from the Imam named Ishmael, the son of Dashafar. Now, the Caliphate was divided into three empires. The family of Omnia reigned at Granada in Spain. The family of Abbas at Baghdad on the banks of the Tigris, and the family of Fatima at Cairo on the Nile. This is what they call the three divisions of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Within the division of the three caliphates, there were 72 sects or groups, with the 72 helpers and 12 advisors of Muhammad and 12 imams. The Ishmaelites are the followers of Ham, who was the god Amen or Aman, and is the reason we find them among the Fatimas of Egypt, who were all Ishmaelites. The Persians are said to be the followers of Shem, and the Turks of Japheth. How the three connected themselves is unknown to me, but the story of Ham, Shem, and Japheth being brothers and the ancestors of the Khazarians is definitely not the reason. But whether it was by way of descent or by the imposition of hands with the three ancient patriarchs, the Ishmaelites were in war with the caliphs, and the Byzantines, because they both usurped a part of their domain. Both Syria and Egypt were of the worshippers of Ham, and the story of the uncovering of the patriarchs by Ham, as indeed the book almost says, was invented to palliate or justify the usurpation or superiority of the other brothers. So the Caliphates created the story of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and its true meaning was their division of the world, or the division of their domain between the three empires, which were the Caliphates of Amnia in Granada, Spain, the Caliphate of Abbas in Baghdad, and the family of Fatima at Cairo on the Nile, and is the true meaning of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, their rule of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Now your question should be, if the story of Ham, Shem, and Japheth were created by the Khazars or Moors, then why is their story in the Christian's Bible? And why do all three religions share the same stories? Because they are all in it together. The Christianity we know today came out of Egypt. The secret teachings of the Kabbalah, Masons, Knight Templars and others, secret societies started with the Ishmaelites. They were the founders, the forefathers, and considered themselves the illuminated ones. When they created the story of Ham, Shem, and Japheth is uncertain. But what I can tell you is that there was a grand meeting. It appears that in 402 and AD 1011 a great meeting was held at Baghdad when the claims of the Fatimites, or should I say, the followers of Ham Caliphate, were declared to be null and void. So here we may see why history came from the other two caliphs and not the Mohammedans. Here, in secrecy of the meeting, the true character of the whole shows itself. What could be the reason for keeping this secret meeting held in Baghdad, which was the capital of the enemies of the Fatimites, who were considered Ham, or labeled Ham? The circumstance of the secrecy here is in perfect keeping with what I have maintained, where the story of Ham, Shem, and Japheth were further orchestrated, where Ham was now corrupted. The Ishmaelites pretended that Muhammad told them to divide the world into three parts, or his followers pretended that he had divided the world for them, and that this was done in consequence of the lines of Ham and Japheth having failed. Therefore, he had made a new division as survivor of the eldest line through the son of Abraham by the princess Hagar. Was this the reason for the secret meeting, where the story of Ham, Shem, and Japheth was tuned to the finest, where Ham and Japheth were now or no longer worthy? Remember when I said the Moors possessed many secrets? Well, the caliphs were of an esoteric and an exoteric system filled with secrecy. They were the first secret societies and masonries, or masons, the order that is. This secret meeting, attended by the highest initiates, a great body of delegates of all parts of Asia, this is nothing but men gathering to boost the divine claim of the person calling them together. It was through the Khazarians that came the origin of Freemason. The kings of Egypt were under the priest, and the priest of Egypt taught idolatry to the populace while concealing the true dogmas under hieroglyphics and symbols. But their great secret was the knowledge of a future state, that their belief or popular belief was that they should rule the world. All this secrecy was done to prevent mankind or the populace from having their minds diverted from the necessary pursuits of social life by refined and abstruse speculations respecting the future. The Mohammedans were the Ishmaelites, the worshippers of Ham, who were at war with the other caliphs. The grand secret meeting held in Baghdad in 402 and the other in AD 1011 by the caliphs were held to denounce the Mohammedans, or the worshippers of Ham, who were the Egyptians and Syrians at that time. No, this secret meeting proves that the story of Ham and Japheth being cursed was invented along with the sons of Noah. So the secret of the caliphs or the Moors was that the world would be their state. The same doctrine of the Kabbalah or the Gnosis were most likely taught in the Old and in the New Academy of Egypt. The ancient philosophers knew very well that the belief of the truth of a dogma can never be praised or glorified, nor the disbelief of it criminal. The high priest could not see in what manner it would benefit those whose whole time was required to procure the comforts of life. Now the Khazarians were a secret society, or of an esoteric and exoteric system, with initiates, degrees, and levels. The history of Ishmaelism speaks who was the sixth of the Fatimid caliphs. About AD 1004, established the college or lodge at Cairo, called Dar al-Bikmet, or the House of Wisdom, which he abundantly provided with books and mathematical instruments, and celebrated professors, and a revenue of 250,000 ducats. In this institution, all the sciences were publicly taught, as well as those of the secret doctrine which their book was believed to contain. The secret doctrine or mysteries were only taught by degrees, or initiations, or gradations from lower to higher ranks. The Templars, Assassins, and Freemasons were of the same philosophy. No, after the destruction of the House of Wisdom at Cairo in the 12th century, it was soon restored, though in a new place, and it was about the same time when London Temple Church was rebuilt in a new place as well, and the churches in Cambridge and Northampton. At the time, there must have been some general persecution of the order and destruction of their buildings, and perhaps on its nominal renewal it may have taken the names of Teutonic, or Templar, or St. John. These were in fact all the same societies, as much as modern Templars, Rosicrucians, and Masons are, for they are nothing more than different lodges of the one or same order. As I have stated before, there were several migrations to Africa in the earliest times. I haven't even mentioned the very first migration to Africa, which I won't in this lesson. I think I am already causing enough trouble. If the very first black Orientalists came from the Indus and built the Giza pyramids, and the second wave, which came a long time after and eventually created their own Egypt, that's the reason for Upper and Lower Egypt, there was also another wave of black Orientalists who became the Gadelians of Ireland and the Hebrews in Africa. They eventually left Egypt and populated Palestine. They were the first Egyptians, Palestinians, and Arabs. Then we had the migration to Africa by the Ishmaelites, of which I just gave a brief history on their early beginnings and migrations. They were the ones that conquered Egypt and the so-called Turkish countries and most of Africa. No, all those stories coming out of Egypt were first created by the black Khazars, who later became the Moors, and further corrupted later by the French. Africa was conquered by the Ishmaelites from before the Common Era, and is a part of the religious wars explained in my video on the origin of the Amazon. So, the Africa they sold us is not the real or true Africa, not when you look at the picture from this angle, or when all the difficulties are removed. Oh, and before I forget, Second Egypt was not established until the second wave of black Orientalists. It was always a marshland. So, will Eurocentric's primary sources tell you that? I don't think so, because most are not truthful, and some honestly don't know or just downright disagree because of their beliefs, so they would not mention it. Let me make it clear. I consider myself African, and the people of Africa my people. I was born and I have been labeled an African, and I accept it because I am. And I am also Asian and of the Caribbean, and I am European, and I am American. I am the world, and you are the world also. They have reduced us and have segregated us to continents and countries, borders and territories. That story of Noah and his sons is a perfect example of how this was done. This story was created by the Black Khazars. They might not have created the story of Noah because that story was created before their time, but they surely created the sons of Noah, and the story was further elaborated on by the Byzantines. We were further segregated when the white Europeans made Africa the land of Ham, which meant even if you came from Mars, you were an African if you were black. Bear in mind, during this time, Asia was black up till the early 1900s, which I have shown in my series when Asia was black. But how would you know? Because they erased it from history, or at least tried to erase it from history. The white Europeans also made themselves the original inhabitants of Europe, which is very much far from the truth, proven by Giuseppe Sergi and others. And their stories are false, and the stories of Africa are also false. My question is, how did we miss all of this? Or is it a case of looking for information to match our beliefs? We were programmed to respond to the words Africa, slavery, and among other words. We were also programmed to believe the story of Ham. I will never subject myself to words. We were the ones that created them, whether the Indus, Africa, or the Americas. I won't be subjected to none, but I have made it my duty to find the truth, whatever that is, with no strings attached or agendas. No one knows my religion or tradition or way of life because I never made it a part of history. History is about finding what is or what was, and not what you want it to be, or should I say what they have made it to be. And I am now talking to the Eurocentrics, Afrocentrics, and the latest Americentrics. Well, I can tell you right now, there was life before the Greeks. Greece is where the West got their knowledge. And there was also life before the Black Khazars in Africa, who are also called Moors or Arabs. As I have stated before, the Black Khazars were the builders of history, alongside the Byzantines, the same history we have to deal with today, a history that can only be supported by lies and more lies, or stories that are all dead ends and can only be connected with more stories and can't be connected with the truth, because the truth can only be connected with the truth. All those stories about the first kings of the first kingdom of Egypt are false. It was all fabricated, a myth. Now, after the Greeks came into Egypt, the Egyptians were forced to speak Greek. The Greeks were originally Pelasgians, by the way, before they became Greeks. So, the Egyptian language was changed to Greek. Thus, the reason for everything scientific and biological have Greek words, because they got the knowledge from the Egyptians. However, the original Egyptian language was lost, but I can tell you that they spoke Phoenician. Or is it that the reason why it was lost was because knowing that they spoke Phoenician would open up a portal to the truth? I have had it with yesterday's historians, and I am also disappointed in today's historians. Everyone wants to be politically correct. I honor my former black historians, even if they did not know what we know today. I still honor them for the work they did with the resources and information they had at the time. But it is our duty and our job to add to what they gave us and find the truth and ultimately correct history. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Take care.